20 million barrels of oil, every single day, through a gap of water so narrow you could drive across it in under half an hour. That's the Strait of Hormuz. And right now, it's closed. Not closed because of a hurricane or a shipping accident. Closed because Iran decided to close it, and the rest of the world, including the most powerful military on the planet, is still trying to figure out what to do about that.
But they have to open it up. They have to open up the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran isn't trying to defeat the United States in a traditional war. It's exposing how vulnerable the global economy is by controlling a single choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. If you haven't been following this story closely, I want to walk you through exactly what happened, why it matters, and why this situation is genuinely one of the most significant geopolitical moments in recent decades. This narrow stretch of water, just 33 miles wide at its tightest point, normally carries nearly 20% of the world's oil supply. Roughly 20 million barrels of oil and massive liquefied natural gas shipments flow through it daily. After U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran in February 2026,
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship.
Tehran didn't just respond with words. It struck American military facilities and U.S. allied bases across Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Then it went further, closing the Strait of Hormuz entirely, sending energy markets into chaos, and forcing the world's most powerful military to scramble on two fronts at once. Within weeks, more than 150 ships were stranded outside the strait. Insurance costs for tankers skyrocketed, shipping companies refused to risk passage, and tanker traffic dropped by roughly 70%, sometimes almost reaching zero. This wasn't just a local disruption. It affected 1/5 of global oil exports. Gas prices in the United States spiked around 30%. Businesses struggled with rising costs, and stock markets plunged in response to the sudden uncertainty. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow ribbon of water, suddenly held the world hostage. Welcome back to Progressive Record. If you're new here, subscribe now because this is exactly what we cover. Let's get into it. So first, let's understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually is, because I think a lot of people hear the name and don't fully grasp the scale of what we're talking about. The strait sits between Iran on one side and the Arabian Peninsula on the other. At its narrowest point, it's about 33 miles wide. That's it. And through that narrow gap flows roughly 20% of the entire world's oil supply, 20 million barrels a day, plus enormous shipments of liquefied natural gas. This single waterway handles more energy than any other point on Earth. Now here's the part that makes this situation so precarious. There's no real alternative. There are a couple of pipelines that technically bypass the strait, but their combined capacity is nowhere near enough to replace what moves through the water.
There are alternative pipelines in the region, but they can't move nearly as much oil as the strait.
If the strait closes, that oil doesn't reroute. It just stops. Which means the strait isn't just important, it's irreplaceable. And Iran sits right on top of it. In February 2026, the United States and Israel launched strikes on Iran. The details of exactly what was hit and why are still contested in some quarters, but the outcome is not. Iran responded. Tehran looked at the situation and chose a different kind of pressure entirely. It made the Strait of Hormuz unusable. And here's the thing that I think is genuinely important to understand. Iran didn't need to sink a single ship to do it. What Iran deployed was a combination of naval mines, drone threats, small fast attack boats, and missile positioning. None of this is cutting-edge technology. None of it is expensive compared to what it would take to counter it at scale.
Iran's mine-laying capability and destroying their ability to attack commercial vessels.
But so far, Iran has still been able to mount attacks. And experts say that even just the possibility that Iran has laid mines in the strait is enough to scare ships from crossing it.
But in a narrow, confined waterway, these tools are extremely difficult to neutralize cleanly. You can't just sweep mines once and declare the route safe. You can't guarantee that a drone won't hit a tanker. And in an environment where uncertainty is that high, the people who own the ships and the cargo don't wait for certainty. They leave. Which is exactly what happened. Tanker traffic dropped by around 70% almost immediately. Then it fell further, in many stretches of time, to nearly zero. More than 150 fully loaded vessels were reported sitting just outside the strait, waiting, unable to enter. Not because they'd been attacked, because their insurance companies withdrew coverage, because the risk calculation became impossible, because Iran issued warnings telling ships not to pass, and the shipping industry, rationally, believed it. Fear did the work. That's the part that's hardest to counter militarily, because you can't bomb a feeling. Now let's talk about what this actually cost the world, because the numbers here are striking. Oil prices surged to between $115 and $126 per barrel, one of the sharpest and fastest price rises in recent memory. Inside the United States, petrol prices rose by roughly 30%. That's not a minor inconvenience. That's a real hit to real people. Families cutting back on driving, small businesses watching their operating costs climb, delivery companies passing increases on to consumers. The cost of energy doesn't stay in the energy sector. It bleeds into everything. Food prices started moving too. This is the connection most people don't immediately make. Fertilizer production depends heavily on natural gas, a lot of which moves through the strait. Disrupt that supply chain, and you're not just affecting fuel. You're affecting how food gets grown, how it gets transported, how much it costs by the time it reaches a shelf. Industrial materials, chemicals, manufacturing inputs, all of it connected to the same disrupted flow. Stock markets fell, not catastrophically, but enough to reflect a genuine anxiety about where this was heading. Investors don't like uncertainty, and a closed strait is about as much uncertainty as global energy markets can absorb without reacting badly. Asia felt it especially hard. China and India both depend heavily on Gulf oil. It's not a minor part of their energy mix, it's central to it. And what was the US doing through all of this? Large-scale naval deployment. Carrier groups moved into the region. Military assets were repositioned. Statements were made. Pressure was applied. And the strait stayed closed. This is the part of the story that I think deserves honest discussion, because it's uncomfortable, but it's real. The United States has the most powerful navy in the world, the most advanced military technology, the largest defense budget, and it is, genuinely, visibly, struggling to reopen a waterway 33 miles wide. That's not a criticism of the people serving there. It's a description of the strategic problem, because the tools Iran is using are specifically designed to be hard to answer cleanly. Mines are difficult to detect and time-consuming to sweep. Drones are cheap to produce and numerous. Small, fast boats are hard to track in a cluttered waterway. To neutralize all of these threats comprehensively, and to do it in a way that makes commercial insurers confident enough to resume coverage, requires an operation that is expensive, complex, and slow. Meanwhile, Iran's cost of maintaining disruption is a fraction of America's cost of trying to undo it. That asymmetry, cheap disruption forcing an expensive response, is the heart of Iran's strategy. And it's working. Each day of naval deployment costs billions. Each day the strait stays closed. The economic pressure on the global economy intensifies. And each day this continues without resolution. The message being received by governments worldwide gets a little louder. A determined regional power, using relatively modest tools, can hold the world's most important energy corridor and force a superpower into an unresolved, expensive defensive position. But I want to say something here that I think gets lost in the heat of this story. Iran demonstrating this kind of leverage isn't cost-free for Iran either. The country is under significant economic pressure of its own. The diplomatic fallout from closing the strait is real, including with countries Iran needs as trading partners. A prolonged closure damages relationships that Tehran has spent years building, particularly in Asia. This is not a strategy with unlimited runway, and the US hasn't stepped back. The pressure is building, the naval presence is large, and the political stakes are enormous. There's one detail in this story that I keep coming back to, because I think it says more than almost anything else. Iran didn't uniformly block all ships. It reportedly allowed certain vessels, Indian ships specifically, to continue passing through. It made exceptions, selectively, by choice. Think about what that means. Iran wasn't running a chaotic blockade driven by panic or escalation. It was making deliberate decisions about who gets to trade and who doesn't. That's not a country that's lost control of the situation. That's a country using access as a diplomatic instrument, rewarding certain relationships, pressuring others, demonstrating that it holds the key and decides who uses the door. That single detail transforms the entire picture. This isn't just disruption, it's a demonstration of control. And it doesn't stop there. Iran has made it known that it's willing to discuss reopening the strait, but on its own terms. One of those terms, floated publicly, is a shift away from the US dollar in oil trade. Iran has signaled that countries willing to conduct energy transactions in Chinese yuan could find the passage considerably more welcoming. Think about what that means. Iran isn't just using the strait as a military pressure point, it's using it as a financial one. Every tanker sitting outside that waterway is also a quiet argument for de-dollarization, for moving global energy trade away from the currency system that gives Washington so much of its economic leverage. China has been pushing for yuan-denominated oil contracts for years. Iran just gave that argument the most dramatic advertisement it's ever had. The strait isn't only a choke point for oil anymore, it might be becoming a choke point for the dollar itself. And here's something that nobody is really talking about honestly. Before the US and Israel attacked Iran, the Strait of Hormuz was open. Ships were passing through every day. Oil was moving normally. The world economy was fine. Then the attack happened. Iran closed the strait. Oil prices shot up. Hundreds of ships got stuck. The whole world felt the pain. And now the US is sitting in negotiations with Iran, trying to get the strait open again. Just stop and think about that for a moment. The strait was open before the attack. The attack happened. The strait closed. Now they're negotiating to get it open again. If those negotiations work and the strait reopens, the US will probably call it a victory. They'll say the pressure worked. They'll say Iran blinked. But how is that a victory? You didn't achieve something new. You just got back to where things already were before you started. That's not winning. That's spending billions of dollars, destabilizing the global economy, and going through months of crisis just to end up back at square one. Iran, on the other hand, came out of this with real gains. It proved it could hurt the global economy. It proved the US couldn't quickly fix the problem. Do you think the US made the right call by striking Iran? Do you think reopening the strait through negotiations counts as a victory or not? Drop your opinion in the comments below. We read every single one and we would really love to know what you think. Thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next one.